So I am so excited for today. Hello for everybody who's joining us today. Thank you for being here live. If you are watching on the replay, please let us know if you're watching the replay by putting in the comments #replay. And if you have any questions that you want to ask, please ask them during or after. If there's something that we didn't address that you'd like further discussion on, or if there's a question that you have, Amanda will be there to answer your question afterwards. So I'm super excited to introduce to you Amanda Grant. She is here to talk to us about overwhelm, which is something that I can raise my hand to. I have experienced it. I think every single day we experience it, but it all depends on how we respond to that, right? So I'm so excited that Amanda is here to help share with us how to get a little relief from that overwhelm. And what we're going to talk about is air. So before we get too far into that, Amanda, will you tell everybody, like, introduce yourself? Who is Amanda, and how did you actually come to focus on stress and overwhelm? Because this is a really important element of living a healthy life, and nobody wants to feel overwhelmed their entire lives. So how did you come to this conclusion that this is something you could focus on?
By experiencing it. People say that all the time. How did you get started? And I was like, I started by being a stressed out, overwhelmed mom. So I'm Amanda Grant. I live in Ontario, Canada. I have a little boy who's almost 4 and very excited about it. I'm married, and my coaching business is called Thriving Mamas Coaching, where I focus on helping moms deal with stress and overwhelm. So I was always on the anxious side of the spectrum, I would say. And then it, like, always wanted to kind of do everything, please everyone. And that's all well and good until it comes at the expense of yourself and your health, right? So I would say my first big kind of milestone, I guess, was when I was hospitalized and diagnosed with a rare disease in 2012. So that was kind of the beginning of, you need to step back and look at things differently, right? Like when you're literally in that position of, I can't do anything on my to-do list right now, right? And I feel like there's people counting on me, but they're going to have to figure it out because I'm literally stuck in the hospital here and no one knows what's going on. So I learned some things from that for sure, around like trying to say no and ask for help and kind of keep the plate a little less full. But then I became a mom, and it's a whole new journey, right? It's a whole new identity. And we had kind of a rough start to life, I guess. He was in the NICU. He was small. So, there was lots of intervention, which was amazing and helpful, but there's that added pressure of like, you're trying to figure this out. And then you have professionals around you all the time telling you what's best. And that kind of brings its own stress. And so as I've my response to most struggles is to learn about it and do some self-reflection and figure it out. And so I don't actually think that stress and overwhelm is something that you ever like figure out and then it's done. It's a process like anything worthwhile, really. And so, but I got to the point where it became like a natural shift to take what I had learned to help other people. If I could make anyone's journey just sort of even one step less stressful and painful, and let someone know they're not alone, and they're not the only ones dealing with this, then I feel good about that.
That's so awesome. And what a powerful thing. So I had my own personal experience with health, which is why I became I focus on the psychology of health rather than just diet and exercise as a two-dimensional way of improving our health. And I found that stress was a huge factor in how our body responds to things. And clearly your body doing the same thing. First of all, first of all, stress was a real component of your real-time physical health that you needed to focus on.
Yeah.
Focus on improving. And then second of all, something that I love is that you've taken this and you've run with it in a positive direction, where so many people would feel like, oh, now I'm limited. Now I can't do the things that I wanted to do before. So how do you feel like you came to that conclusion of seeing it as, like you said, this blessing of, I need to share this with other people so they don't go through the same things that I did? Do you feel like you went through a process of, this sucks, woe is me, to this is awesome, this is exactly what I needed, kind of to help me serve the greater good?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's always sort of a mourning period. So especially when I was first diagnosed, so I have Addison's disease. It's an autoimmune condition. It means that my adrenal glands don't work. So I went through a period where I was experiencing a whole lot of things that I was essentially being told I shouldn't, right? No, you're on this medication and that controls it, and that's not really a thing, right? So then you start like questioning yourself. And you're like, no, I'm pretty sure this is what's going on in my body. And then I would say I joined a support group of other people with adrenal insufficiencies, and I felt heard, right? I felt like they were like, oh no, you're right. We experienced that, right? That it doesn't reflect it in the medical literature because it's so rare. But I suddenly had this room full of people that had the same experience as I did, which was really empowering. And it's part of the reason I started my Facebook group, so that women had a chance to sort of have this safe, supportive space where someone raises their hand and says, I'm struggling with that. There's 250 other people in the group who might be like, yeah, that's me too. And I think that feeling heard and understood is really powerful. So that was sort of part of that in my journey. And then I thankfully had a doctor come along who said, yeah, sometimes things are going to happen in your body that we can't explain, but it's not you. You're not crazy. You need to listen to your body. And so that was really powerful too. And I think that sort of formed, as I did more reading and learning about stress, that physical piece and like that health piece, right? Is that so often our bodies give us these messages that we ignore. So it's like the gentle rapping on the door, oh, I have a headache one day. And then, it gets louder and louder and louder until you pay attention. And so, yeah.
Wow, that's true. And sometimes it's a hit over the head with a 2x4, which is where I feel like I experienced that too. Like, wake up and smell the roses. Yeah. This is what is sending you down this path, so you need to pay attention to it. So when other moms, now you focus on moms because you are a mom, so you can speak to that. So when other moms are feeling this stress, and I guess let me back up for a minute. You experience stress on a very high level. And I feel like a lot of us experience stress on a very high level regularly, but we don't often recognize it as a high level of stress. So can you maybe share with us some ways that we would experience stress, so that people can go, aha, maybe I am running myself into the ground. Maybe I am experiencing stress. And then we'll talk about the things that they can do to combat that. So how does stress kind of rear its ugly head in its smallest or largest forms? What have you found?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think often it appears in our bodies. So even if our thinking brains aren't registering it, our survival brain is. And so it's that whole fight or flight thing, right? Your survival's brain job is to keep you safe from the saber-toothed tiger that's going to try to eat you. Only now the saber-toothed tiger is your work deadline or the notifications on your phone. And it's just it's triggered all the time. And so And your brain also doesn't care or know the difference between an actual threat and a perceived threat. So even if it's something like you're being triggered, a feeling of not being capable or not being worthy or something, that's a psychological threat. And so you get stress activation from that too. So you might feel headaches, you might feel a tightness in your chest, you might get sweaty, you might have clammy palms, changes in like breathing rate, headaches more often, sleep disturbances. So it can feel just a little off, right? But then you get used to it, right? And then all of a sudden, 2 bottles of Advil later, you're like, wait a second. I've been having headaches a lot. So it can take a while to clue in. I think that one thing I find moms are experiencing a lot that they talk about that they don't recognize as stress and that they're blaming themselves for is when quote unquote little things really bother them. So the FedEx guy is half an hour late and they feel like they want to lose it. Someone, cuts them off in traffic and they're so angry. And then they judge themselves for feeling that way because they think this is just a little thing. Why am I so upset? But it's because of that chronic stress piece. So there's something called allostatic load where what you really want is you have stress activation, which your body is meant to do, but then it's meant to come all the way back down. That activation, that energy is supposed to be all released. And then you have a period of rest, and then your body's kind of ready to go for the next stressor. But when in our modern world, when we have all these things that are triggering that stress response, then we're not coming all the way back down in between. And so that baseline just creeps up and up and up and up until you're carrying this higher base load of stress. And so then the smallest thing puts you over the threshold.
That makes so much sense, especially when, this may be an extreme case, but to the point, I saw and chose to not read the article. I saw a headline that said 6-year-old child is killed over literally, quite literally, a glass of spilled milk or spilled water or something like that, where the parents or the caretakers were so at that high point, like you're saying, that high point that we now live with regularly, and not realizing that their stress load is overwhelmingly high and has not come back down, and they need to take care of themselves to bring that down so that those things don't trigger a dramatic response. Now that's a totally extreme example, but I believe this is what you're speaking to. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So, and I love that you're talking about the necessity for full recovery. So when people are experiencing stress, how do they reduce that stress to come to a full recovery? Will you share some strategies with us so that they can reduce that level where they don't think that they are experiencing this high level of stress because that's the norm and they need to bring that norm back down? How do they do that?
I think I would say the favorite way that I talk about is about, I think it's Joe Dispenza that says emotions are energy in motion. And so if you think about like a little person in your life, when they get really happy or excited, you can see it in their body, right? They're moving around, they're jumping around, they can't contain the energy of the emotion. And so it's the same thing with any emotion, right? It comes with that energy in your body. And so if you can intentionally release that energy, then it's helpful. So any sort of movement, a walk out, nature is really good. A walk outside, some time in nature. You can feel it in your, like you have to start to pay attention to your body, right? If you start to feel that really tense feeling then maybe you need a bigger form of release. So maybe you need to scream into a pillow when no one's around. Maybe you need to, kick and punch that old chair in the basement when no one's around judging you and thinking you're crazy, right? Don't do it in front of your kids. They'll get confused. But it has to come out. And so I feel like we talk a lot about, mindfulness and meditation and all these calming techniques for stress, which are very important, but then lots of people feel like they don't work. And so the reason they don't work is because that energy is still in your body. It has to come out, and then the calming techniques can really do their job and bring you down that extra bit.
I love that. So when someone is punching a pillow or screaming or like a punching bag, going to a boxing class and they're punching like they really want to hurt someone. It's not that they want to hurt someone. It's simply they have a lot of energy to release.
Yes. And it's way better to do that than to actually feel like you want to hurt someone. Right. Yeah.
Right. Depends on where it's directed, right? The motive.
Yes.
It's not bad until it turns into hurting another person. Actual, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, so I won't even try, but that's really great. That's really great. Some really great strategies. So you have a method that you talk about to kind of become more aware of this overwhelm and the stress. And I put it in the title, people need to get air. So can you share more about this AIR method with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
So the A stands for acknowledge and accept. So that kind of speaks to your point about how people don't always realize the stress that they're under, especially when it becomes normal. Or we say things like, so-and-so has it worse than me, or, oh, I shouldn't really be upset about this because, I have so much to be grateful for. And there's this element of like, especially with moms, it feels to me in a lot of groups, I see people aren't necessarily comfortable with just saying, I'm struggling, period. There has to be I'm struggling, but I love my child. I'm struggling, but I love being a mom. I'm struggling, but others have such a worse circumstances. Comparing your stress to someone else's is not going to make yours any better. It's just not. It doesn't change how you feel. In fact, it might make yours worse because you get this cycle happening in your brain. Your survival brain is telling you there's a threat or a perceived threat. Your thinking brain is saying, no, it's not a problem. And your survival brain then ramps up its response because it's like, no, there's a problem here. And it's this back and forth, and it wastes a lot of energy. It can be really draining. So acknowledging what's actually happening, accepting what's actually happening, are huge keys that can help deflate the stress and the overwhelm right away. And people often have, sorry, go ahead.
No, people have often, go ahead.
They have trouble with the accept piece because it feels like giving in, or it feels like, well, I don't like what's happening, so I can't accept it. You're not saying you like it, but it's happening. So you're saying it's happening, right? Because when you fight against the reality or you rage against the reality, again, it just kind of burns more energy that you could be using to actually make your situation better.
So two things to this, and I love it. The one is that like my observation from this and as a mother too, is when we acknowledge our feelings, our first intuition is to feel very guilty, to kind of shame and blame ourselves for feeling that way, instead of being able to avoid those feelings. When none of us can avoid those feelings, we simply need to work through them. Yes. So I love that you've said that. And then darn, there was something else and it totally left my mind. So I guess it will come up. But I love that. Like, you're not saying, you shouldn't be feeling this way. You're saying it's okay. There is no need for guilt and shame for experiencing any emotion. for experiencing any feeling. The key here now is to understand it and move forward.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So that's kind of, that leads nicely into the I. So the I stands for internal shifts. And so that's where I talk about a lot about self-compassion. And so it's, again, that sort of fight between the two parts of your brain. If you can look at all those things that you're feeling or going through and react with compassion, then it activates the care centers of your brain. You might get a rush of oxytocin, and that can sort of help calm the stress activation as well. We're not taught to be compassionate with ourselves, especially as women. I feel like we're taught to be compassionate with everybody else. And so if it's hard for you to do that, there's two things you can do. One is talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend. Or two is, and it might sound or feel strange, but your brain won't know the difference. If you just like give yourself some loving touch, you can stroke your hand, put your hands on your face. Your brain doesn't know if it's coming from you or it's coming from someone else who loves you. So as long as the intent is there, it will still elicit that like being cared for response. And then the words of self-compassion might come a little easier as well.
Okay. I love that. I was actually going to ask you, okay, how do people create this internal shift inside to go from feeling guilty to more compassionate about themselves? And I'm frantically taking notes. I hope everybody else is writing things down, but I love all of these things because they are real-time steps for us to really deal with the loads of stress that we are faced with right now, especially living in during a pandemic.
Yeah.
Something that you said resonated with me, and I hope it does with other people, that when we speak positive words out loud to ourselves, our brain, just like you said, doesn't register whether it's coming from someone else. Those thoughts and speaking those thoughts will help to rewire our brain to say, you know what, even if I don't believe this is true completely, I can start to believe that this is true. So the necessity of consistently doing this over a period of time, not just a one time, I was angry, so I said to myself, you are a good person, you're a good mom, whatever things that you say to yourself are going to be really powerful. But you just have to keep trying.
Yes.
Keep doing it.
The keep trying is so important. So there's lots of talk, especially I feel like in Facebook groups right now, about mindset and sort of the power of mindset and having the right mindset. But I worry a little bit that implies to some people, if I have the right mindset, if I have a positive mindset, I will only ever have positive thoughts. And that is not remotely true. You cannot stop the thoughts from coming into your head. You can get better at responding to them in a different way. But again, it's that practice coming back, right? So maybe you have like a week in a row where you only have positive self-talk. Fantastic. And then all of a sudden, something happens and one of those sort of unhelpful thoughts slips in. That doesn't mean your mindset is no good now. It doesn't mean that you failed. It means that your brain has been doing that for a long time and you're not going to stop it even in just a week. And so that thought emerging isn't a bad thing. It just is. And then you need to say, okay, that's not helpful. How can I reframe that and kind of move forward, as opposed to become stuck by it or letting it define you or your day?
Awesome. I love that. I'm listening to the book called Grit by Angela Duckworth. She's an organizational psychologist, and this book speaks to what you are talking about. And like, again, Tony Robbins does the same thing when something is happening, and he teaches everybody this, that when something happens and you don't want it to happen, when you're trying to change a habit, when you're trying to change an action, you tell yourself out loud what you're going to do instead. Yes. So talking to yourself is not a sign of being crazy. It's a sign of coaching yourself into a new habit, a new lifestyle, a new person. Because like you said, these, our brains aren't trained yet to respond to certain things when we've been responding reactively in other ways. So we can retrain our brains. And to your credit, like this consistently saying these things over and over and over again are going to yield actual results if you keep this persistent. When these thoughts come up, because they will, then you can respond with these steps. So acknowledging and accepting, and then these internal shifts of being compassionate with yourself. I love it. So what would be the third and final step then in this AIR method?
Actually, I'll stick another sort of thing in the eye, if that's okay.
Oh, please. Yes.
Because it can definitely, that's okay. It can be more than self-compassion is a big one. But another big one is around sort of values-based living, essentially. So a lot of the times, if we're not living how we want, if we're not like living according to sort of that big picture of what we want life to look like, then it can feel really distressing. So even what might seem like a simple example, you're going to bed feeling out of sorts, your kids were asking you to spend time with them, you're doing the dishes and getting ready for tomorrow, and you say no, and then you are like, I feel crummy. Why? Well, if your value is actually face-to-face quality time with your kids, but you were putting that aside for this to-do list that isn't as high on your value list, then you feel out of alignment. And so that causes stress and discomfort.
Yes. This is something that I teach my clients as well, that when you set boundaries are so very important to creating this more freedom, less stress kind of lifestyle, or these habits. Because when we do say, okay, when I am done with work at 4, then I will sit down and play with my kids. And instead we get wrapped up in work until 5, and then we get started on dinner until 5:30. Then we're like, oh, I'm a crappy mom. I haven't done what I've said I'm going to do. And it's exactly like when we have this self-trust, this level of I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, and I can only do those if I respect the boundaries that I've set for myself as much as for anybody else, then my confidence grows in the things that I say I'm going to deliver on.
I love that. Yeah. And your actions there's so much in our life that we can't control, right? Like we were just saying, we can't actually control the thoughts and the emotions that pop up into our heads, but we can control what we do, right? We can always control our behavior. So
yes. Yeah. Till the day we die, we can choose exactly how we're going to respond to everything that comes our way, which it will. So I love that, values-based living. So do you teach your clients how to assess their values?
Yes. So sometimes people think they know, but even that can be an interesting exercise. So if you do things like look at the things around you, what do you see, right? What's always in your environment? If maybe there's books, maybe there's your kids' toys, whatever it is, right? That's a clue, right? As to what you're actually paying attention to all the time. How would you choose to spend your time? What would you always be willing to spend money on, kind of no matter what? Those are some good ways to get started. And then you start to see the trends in how they come together. And sometimes people are surprised when they go, wait a second, that's not actually how I want that to be, which is powerful too, right? Because then you can kind of say, okay, who do you want to be, right? And your brain is very good then at mapping out a plan for your identity. So if you need to sort of shift and change that identity to be what you want, then you have those values, and then you kind of carry that out into your scheduling, everything else in your life, like you're saying.
Yeah. That is so, I love that, because I have done it personally, and then working with my kids, my family, and clients too, telling them, okay, as you do focus on who you want to be, it's possible by telling yourself you are this way and these are the things that you need to do to get there, and then your brain starts to formulate the direction in which you go, right? What you focus on grows. So the more you focus on the areas that you want to develop, the more you surround yourself with a supportive environment, like you said, like with your kids' toys, or if you want to get healthier, the way you fill your fridge or your pantry, the way you take care of your body, the way you interact with people, all of these things are going to influence who you become. So I love that that's an important part of the AIR method, and actually reducing this stress that that is so prevalent and yet goes so, I want to say unnoticed, but I think just avoided in our lives.
Yes. There's actually, what you were saying reminds me of a cool study about smoking cessation. And so they looked at people who were trying to quit, and if they were offered a cigarette, they would either say, no, thank you, I'm not a smoker, or they would say, no, thank you, I'm trying to quit. The people who said, I'm not a smoker, were way more likely to not be smoking 6 months from now, because it was their new identity that they were owning.
Yes. In the book Atomic Habits by
I love that book.
Yes, I love it too. It's so good. We talked about it last week with Allison Nilsson, and he said that too, to, you begin your habits by first identifying yourself with that type of person. If you say, I smoke, but I'm trying to quit, you're still considering yourself a smoker. But if you say, I'm not a smoker, then I'm going to do everything I can to become a person who is not a smoker. So I love that. Okay, so do you have anything else to add to I, or
no, that's probably good for I could go I could talk for a week about I, so that's okay. Good for now.
I love that too. That's kind of my jam. That's where I like to stay. So okay.
The R is release negativity. So we actually kind of talked about this already with the releasing the stress activation.
Okay.
So it's that it can't stay bottled up, right? The more we push down and push through because we think we're supposed to, or we don't think we're supposed to be feeling the way that we are, the worse it gets. It has to come out.
So would you say that these steps follow the pattern of AIR every single time, that in order for someone to be okay? So how have you found it most useful? I love the releasing activation. Sometimes I feel like, I need to just go out and go for a walk, or do jumping jacks, or, go up and take a deep breath and lay down on my floor for a few minutes, which really helps. What pattern do you see people following most often, or is it different for everybody?
I think it's different for everyone, and kind of whatever their kind of package or programming is. I think some people spend a while in that A piece, right? They're very used to meeting everyone else's needs instead of their own. They're not comfortable saying what they want or what they need, let alone telling someone that something's happening that they don't like, or talking out loud and saying those things that they're worried will hurt other people's feelings or make them look a certain way. So sometimes there's a lot of exploration just within that A part, I think. And then especially the self-compassion piece kind of comes in right away. Like it all kind of intermingles, right? So if you're having trouble saying, accepting, then you need to look at that with self-compassion. And then there's always a reframing piece. Sometimes people say things, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. Nope, there's no just about it, right? You can say, so it's, I think it's really fluid and they all kind of fit together.
Okay, that's awesome. So I think that empowers people to know, look, all of these steps are really important, but nobody's going to experience it the same way. So you take this and run with it with the way that works best for you. I have one more question. How, now someone could take this and be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to use this the next time I experience stress, and then forget. So how do you teach your clients to make this sustainable and scalable through their lives, especially as their children change and get older, and they change and progress? They might run their own business, or take a new job, or lose a job, or whatever. How would you tell them or teach them to integrate this naturally into everyday life, no matter the changes or circumstances?
Yeah. Small baby steps are beautiful.
Yes.
We cannot, and I think it's also even like a whole mindset of, you are not broken, you are not a problem to be fixed, but you want to feel better. And so I read this. Have you read Good Morning, I Love You by Shauna Shapiro?
No.
Oh, I bet you'd love it.
Okay.
So she talks about how perfection is not possible, but transformation is. So life, the quote I wrote about the other day from the book was, life is not a self-improvement project. It's a process of shedding what doesn't serve you, so that you can emerge and live the life that you want to and be who you want to be. So I think it all needs to sort of start from there. And then, it just needs to be really, really small. And it needs to start with that awareness piece. You have to figure out what your reactions are. Some people don't even know, right? You have to maybe do some journaling, doing some tracking. And then ideally the process is going to go slowly enough that it becomes natural. And therefore the brain does get rewired, and it goes with them going forward.
Okay. I love that. So your air piece then could expand in knowing that an A that happens before the acknowledgement and acceptance is being aware. The noticing that something is happening, and being like, okay, in the past, this is how I would respond, or how I'm feeling right now. What would I do? What can I do instead? Kind of, I don't know where I heard it or where I read it, but it's talking about how if you have a plan A and a plan B, and you're always resorting to the plan B, then you never had a plan A to begin with. But I think it helps us to think, okay, this is what I would do normally, or reactively, but this is who I want to be. So this is what I'm going to focus on. And becoming more aware of that. And I love that you say, just take small steps. And it's all about that grace and forgiveness, knowing that we can't be perfect, but that we can change, that we're not broken. We don't need to be fixed, but we can become better than we are, because that's what I feel like life is all about, is progressing and learning and becoming better than we were yesterday. It's little steps at a time. So I love that you say start small. It doesn't have to be a huge thing where you are feeling like you should, hurt your child or whatever. It can be something as small as you spilled your cup of tea, and how you respond to that, becoming more aware of the small things, and then leading up to the bigger things.
And you have to, I love that you talked about reactivities, right? So you have to find the pause so that you can avoid that reactivity and actually choose how you respond. And that alone can be a challenging thing to do, right? And take some practice.
Yeah, there is power in that pause, the space between, and I focus on triggers and anchors. So there is a space between being triggered and then our action in between that actually creates that habit. That space right there is more important than the trigger or the response itself. It's how you become aware, acknowledge, and then choose to respond. That's super powerful. So this has been so fun for me. I hope it has been as fun for you and for those who are watching us. So if you have any questions, Please let us know in the chat when we post the replay in the group. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook, and you're not a part of the group, please join the group so you can watch this replay afterwards and get more advice and resources and tips just like this from experts like Amanda and others who can help us, lower the stress, improve how we're feeling about ourselves, how we feel about the world around us, and really make a bigger difference, because we can then teach that to other people and choose how we, have that compassion. I love that, the compassion, and share those values with others to make a bigger difference in their lives too. So thank you so much, Amanda, for everything today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Oh, and before we go, where can people connect with you? Where can they find you and go deeper with these things, if they're interested, especially our moms who are feeling overwhelmed and stressed today?
Yeah. So I have a free group called Mamas Outshining Overwhelm. And I will be posting some information there soon about an upcoming free workshop around stress that I'll be having. And then I'm launching a group program in April called Identifying and Reshaping Your Stress Patterns. So you can get all that information in the group. And I can stick that link in the comments when the video gets posted. Okay. And I can stick a little gift in there as well. It's a link to 5 steps to clear out overwhelm. So that might help someone.
Heck
as well.
Yeah. I am in that group, and so I encourage all of you who want to be part of that group, who want to learn more about these stressors and reducing the stress, because it's a really, really important influencer in our overall health and how we live our lives and then how we care for others. So I would highly recommend being part of this, and that video is going to be really valuable. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Amanda.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and make it a great day. And we will see you all hopefully in the group, and we'll see you later. Thanks again.